nigga, your nigga just hit her.
If someone attacked your mother, right in front of you, at a gathering you were invited to, right there in front of everyone, was hit in the head, pushed, grabbed by her hair, punched and kicked, how far would you go to protect her? August 9th, 2025. A summer evening in Detroit. Warm, active, the kind of night where people look for somewhere to unwind. That's exactly what this gathering was meant to be. A pool party. Music playing through speakers. Conversations overlapping. People moving between the backyard and the house, drinks being passed around, phones out, recording moments that, at the time, felt harmless. What seems like a night to enjoy became a tragedy. 4 people were stabbed. 2 dead before sunrise, and every moment were caught on camera. Before we get into this, make sure you're subscribed to True Crime Stories Chronicles, and tell me, where are you watching from around the world? By the time this happened, IWhat Hobson was 31 years old enough to understand consequences, old enough to walk away, but also old enough to carry years of built-up emotions, some visible, others not. From what is publicly known, he wasn't a stranger to the people at that gathering. This wasn't a random crowd. These were people within the same circle, friends, acquaintances, familiar faces you see more than once. The kind of environment where boundaries can blur, where respect can sometimes be assumed, instead of maintained. And that matters. At the center of this story is also his mother. While there isn't much publicly documented about her personal life, one thing is clear. She was present in her son's space, among his peers, in an environment that should have been safe. That alone says something about their relationship, and in many cases like this, that presence reflects a level of closeness. Whether it's protective, supportive, or simply a bond that hasn't faded over time. August 9th, 2025. A summer evening in Detroit, warm, active, the kind of night where people look for somewhere to unwind. That's exactly what this gathering was meant to be. A pool party. Music playing through speakers, conversations overlapping, people moving between the backyard and the house, drinks being passed around, phones out, recording moments that, at the time, felt harmless. For most people there, it was just another social night. Familiar faces, friends of friends. The kind of setting where people expect nothing more than laughter, music, and maybe a few loud conversations. And early on, that's exactly what it was. People were relaxed. Some stood near the pool, others sat in small groups, talking. The energy was loose, nothing controlled, nothing structured. Just a typical gathering where everyone assumes things will stay within limits. But environments like that can change quickly. It didn't start with violence. As the night went on, voices started to rise in certain parts of the yard. Conversations became sharper. Body language changed. People standing a little closer. Gestures becoming more aggressive. Movements less relaxed. Still, it hadn't crossed the line yet. Then his mother became part of the scene. Her presence didn't immediately signal anything was wrong. She was simply there, moving within the same space, around the same people, in what should have been a safe environment. But once she became involved in the situation, the tone shifted. What may have been a disagreement between individuals began to feel more personal. The kind of personal that draws attention. People started watching more closely. Some stepped nearer. Others pulled out their phones. And in moments like that, the environment changes again. What could have been resolved quietly now carries weight. Pride enters the situation. Ego follows. No one wants to back down. No one wants to look weak in front of a crowd. And that's where things begin to turn. From the outside, it still looked like a heated moment. Something that might pass. People have seen arguments at gatherings before. Most assume it will end the same way. Raised voices, maybe a brief confrontation, then separation. But from his perspective, it wasn't just noise. He wasn't just seeing an argument. He was watching his mother in the middle of it. Watching the way people spoke to her. The way the situation was escalating around her. The way attention was building. The atmosphere had changed. There was now an edge to the air. Conversations were no longer as relaxed. The moment was building towards something none of them were prepared for. Then the line was crossed. What started as verbal turned physical. Someone stepped forward. Hands were no longer just gesturing, they were making contact. She was pushed, hair was pulled, punched on the face. The movement caught her off balance. Another hit followed, upper body, near the head. The kind of strike that immediately shifts the atmosphere from argument to attack. Gasps cut through the noise. A few people moved in quickly, trying to separate those involved. Others froze where they stood, watching, unsure how far things would go. Phones that had been recording harmless moments were now pointed toward something else entirely. The situation became crowded and chaotic. "Stop! That's his mother! Back up!" Voices rose over each other, urgent now. Someone tried to shield her, stepping between her and the people pushing forward. Another grabbed an arm, trying to drag someone away from the center. But the damage had already been done. This wasn't just a brief shove or a single hit. It was public, and it was happening in front of everyone. That kind of moment doesn't pass quickly, it stays. Eventually, the confrontation broke apart. People pulled back. The space opened up again, though it didn't feel the same. The music was still playing, but it no longer matched the mood. And while others were starting to relax, assuming the worst had passed, he wasn't. Because in that moment, something changed in him. He didn't chase anyone down. Instead, he pulled back. He stepped away from the center of attention, away from the noise, away from the cluster of people still talking about what had just happened. His reaction wasn't loud, it was controlled, measured, and that stood out. Because in situations like this, people expect emotion. Anger, immediate confrontation, something visible. But what they saw from him was the opposite. He was quiet, too quiet. Minutes turned into an hour, then another. The night moved forward. For most people there, the incident became something to talk about rather than something still unfolding. A story forming in real time. A moment they would remember, but not necessarily one they thought would continue. The gap between the incident and what came next wasn't filled with noise, it was filled with thought. 6 hours passed. For most people, the night had already been decided. Some went home, others stayed out, continuing with their plans. But then, he came back, and everything changed. There was no long argument this time, no drawn-out exchange, just movement, fast, direct, focused. The first person struck didn't have time to react. The motion was sudden, close range. The kind of contact that immediately sends people into panic before they even understand what's happening. Then another, and another. Within seconds, confusion spread through the area. People started backing away, trying to create distance, but not everyone could move fast enough. The space that once felt open now felt tight, crowded with fear and movement. Shouts replaced music. People screamed, trying to warn others. "Run! He's got a knife!" Some tried to pull others out of the way. Others froze, caught between reacting and understanding. A few attempted to step in, but the speed of it all made it nearly impossible to control. The attacks weren't random in motion, but they were overwhelming in effect. Victims were struck in different areas. Upper body, torso, non-stop movement that made it hard for anyone nearby to keep track of who had been hit and who hadn't. And that's exactly what happened. The scene collapsed into panic. People ran in different directions, toward exits, toward the street, away from the center of the violence. Some dropped what they were holding. Others shouted names, trying to locate friends in the confusion. 6 hours of silence, 6 hours where nothing happened. And then suddenly, everything did. There was no warning in that final moment, no visible signal that things were about to turn again, just action. And once it started, it didn't take long. By the time it was over, 4 people had been stabbed. 2 lives had been lost. And everyone who was there would leave with a different version of that night than the one they expected when they first arrived. Emergency calls were made within seconds. Voices on the phone, urgent and overlapping, trying to explain a situation that had escalated too fast to fully process. When first responders arrived, the focus shifted immediately to the injured. 4 people had been stabbed. 2 of them were in critical condition. Despite efforts to save them, both victims, 25-year-old Martisha Payne and 31-year-old Jakiria Williams, did not survive. Their lives ended in a place that, just hours earlier, had been filled with laughter. Jakiria Williams, according to reports, had stepped in during the chaos, trying to break up the situation as it unfolded. That decision, made in the middle of confusion and urgency, placed her directly in harm's way. Martisha Payne was also caught in that moment. Another life pulled into a situation that escalated beyond control. The other two victims survived, but with injuries that required immediate medical attention. They were transported for treatment, leaving behind a scene that had already changed too much in too little time. Around them, people stood in shock. Some cried. Others stayed silent, replaying the night from the beginning, trying to understand how it had moved from an argument to something irreversible. Because for everyone there, the shift was impossible to ignore. The same space that had hosted a gathering of friends had now become a place marked by loss. What started as a pool party ended in tragedy. In the immediate aftermath, the scene remained active long after the violence stopped. Emergency responders focused on the victims, while officers began securing the area and gathering initial accounts from those who had been there. People who had arrived for a social night were now being asked to explain what they saw, what they heard, and how everything unfolded. In the middle of that, he was no longer there. After the stabbings, Daiwan Hobson left the scene. For a short period, there was uncertainty about where he had gone, but that didn't last long. Within days, authorities located and arrested him. What had started as a confrontation at a gathering had now become a full criminal case. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with 2 counts of assault with intent to murder. Charges that reflect both the loss of life and the injuries sustained by the survivors. If convicted on those charges, the consequences are severe. First-degree murder carries the possibility of life in prison without parole. The additional assault charges further reinforce the seriousness of the case, outlining the extent of harm caused in those moments. From that point forward, the situation shifted from the chaos of a crime scene to the structure of the legal system, court proceedings, hearings, and the process that follows a case of this magnitude. But outside of the legal process, the impact spread through the community. People who had been present at the gathering were left with more than just memories of what happened. They were left with the weight of it. For some, it was the shock of witnessing violence so suddenly. For others, it was the realization that a familiar environment had turned into something they couldn't control. The names of the victims began to circulate more widely. Martisha Payne, Jaquiria Williams, not just individuals in a report, but people who had lives, families, and connections that extended far beyond that night. And then there was his family. His mother, who had been at the center of the earlier confrontation, now faced a different reality. The situation that had started with her being attacked had escalated into something far more serious, with consequences that affected not just others, but her own son. What happened that night didn't stay contained to one moment. It moved outward, into families, into the community, into a legal process that would continue long after the night itself ended. Because once something reaches this point, there is no returning to how things were before. What makes this case difficult isn't just what happened, it's how fast it happened. A disagreement at a gathering, raised voices, a moment that could have ended with people walking away. But instead, it crossed a line. And once that line was crossed, everything that followed became harder to control. That's how escalation works. It rarely starts at the highest level. It builds. A comment leads to a reaction. A reaction leads to confrontation. And if nothing interrupts that chain early enough, it can move from words to physical contact faster than people expect. In this case, the turning point was clear. The moment his mother was attacked. That moment didn't just trigger anger. It triggered something deeper. For many people, a parent represents respect. So when that respect is challenged publicly, especially in front of others, the emotional response can feel immediate and intense. It's no longer just about what's happening, it's about what it means. And that's where the balance becomes critical. There's a difference between wanting to protect someone and losing control in the process. Protective instinct is natural. It's human. But when that instinct turns into action without pause, without distance, it can lead to decisions that can't be undone. Because anger, especially in moments like this, doesn't always think ahead. It reacts, and reactions don't always consider consequences. That's another pattern this case highlights, how quickly anger can become irreversible. 6 hours passed between the initial attack and what came later. That wasn't a split-second reaction. That was time. Time where the situation could have ended differently. Time where distance could have changed the outcome. But instead, the emotions connected to that earlier moment remained active. And when they resurfaced, the result was far more severe. This is also where environment plays a role. Public settings add pressure. People are watching, reactions feel amplified, pride becomes a factor. No one wants to be seen as backing down. And when that pressure combines with unresolved tension, it creates a situation where decisions are influenced not just by emotion, but by perception. Add a weapon into that environment, and the risk increases immediately. What might have stayed as a physical confrontation becomes something much more dangerous. The presence of a knife changes the stakes instantly. It removes the possibility of controlling the outcome once things begin. That's what makes moments like this so critical. Because once they cross a certain point, they don't slow down. They accelerate. And by the time people realize how serious it has become, it's often too late to reverse it. 2 lives were lost, others were injured. Families were affected. And a situation that started with an argument became something permanent. That's the reality behind this case. One moment of rage can destroy multiple lives. If someone attacked your mother, right in front of you, at a gathering you were part of, how far would you go to protect her? That question doesn't feel abstract anymore. Because in this case, we've seen how that moment played out. It started with a normal night. Music, conversations. People gathered in one place expecting nothing more than a few hours of socializing. Then the argument began. It escalated, and his mother became the center of it. She was pushed, struck, surrounded in front of a crowd that had been there for something completely different. That moment didn't just pass, it stayed, and everything that followed came back to it. Hours later, the setting had changed, but the emotion hadn't. The same situation that had caused tension earlier became the foundation for something far more serious. And when it resurfaced, it did so with consequences that no one there expected when the night began. Now, when you look back at that first moment, the argument, the attack, it's impossible to separate it from what came next. Because they are connected. The laughter that filled that space at the beginning of the night was replaced with something else entirely by the end. Loss, confusion, and questions that don't have simple answers. 2 people didn't make it out of that night, others were injured, and multiple lives changed in a matter of minutes. All connected to a moment that could have ended differently. He wanted to protect her, but in the end, everything was lost. This case leaves a difficult question behind. What would you have done in his position? Would you have walked away or responded differently in that moment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read them and I want to hear your perspective. If this story made you think, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Stories Chronicles for more real cases like this. And most importantly, remember this. Moments of anger don't last forever, but the consequences of acting on them can. Stay aware. Stay in control.